Now, Martin Luther King, because he was the American Gandhi, he had to live that philosophy.
Right.
He had to suffer house bombings and cross burnings in his front yard and being shot at and being jailed as part of his lifestyle.
Right.
In order to make his point with his followers. Malcolm X was saying, stand up for yourself, go about your life, do what you need to do. I'm not asking you to get in the streets. I'm just saying, don't take no guff. You don't have to. Be a man. Be the man that you are. Why should I feel guilty because I'm protecting my family from enemies abroad and within?
So MLK was also suggesting, hey, if you get arrested, get arrested.
Yeah.
So you're setting a standard of responses to fill the jails.
Yes.
Of course, the white people took that on themselves too.
Yeah, but now, again, that was a protest tactic. He wasn't. MLK wasn't saying go get arrested by yourself.
Right. It was part of the group.
He was saying let's fill the jails. And eventually, they can't arrest everybody. This is how we get the law changed. When they suddenly realize that it's so unjust that nobody is abiding by it, they can't enforce it. And they will see the stupidity of the law.
Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
I'm Dr. Phil Nelson, and I want to welcome you to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a series of conversations that were recorded under authentic conditions after the death of George Floyd. Today's topic is heroes. I hope you enjoy.
Now, just continuing on the 13th discussion, John Lewis, Elijah Cummings, it's like,
yes.
Those are the remnants of the civil rights of the
era. Yes.
Of the era. Until Trump, I can't say that I knew their names. What does that say?
Nothing. It doesn't say anything.
Okay.
John Lewis and Elijah were more of a southeastern phenomenon. Had you heard the word Stennis?
The senator?
Yes.
Yeah, but not good things.
Right. I didn't mean it. I was just asking.
Yeah.
But he was an official. He was a government official.
Yes.
Right. Stennis, and who's the North Carolina segregationist that was also a senator? Jesse Helms.
Oh God, yes.
Right. These are the people who were protecting the system, who created the system. But you knew about them because they were government officials.
Right.
Right. John Lewis and Elijah were rebels. Why would you know about, even if you did know their names, I guarantee you didn't think at the time that you learned about their names, you wouldn't think that they were good.
Yeah, I guess if I had heard their names in the 60s or 70s, even though I was yet relatively young, they would have been on the wrong side of the ledger.
That's right. Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
MLK.
Yes.
I know you revere him now.
Yes.
But I want you to take yourself back then when James Edgar Hoover was trying to discredit him actively, and be honest and tell me what your real impression of Martin Luther King was.
It was very positive. I didn't hear about J. Edgar Hoover going after MLK until after he was dead.
Okay.
No.
And I believe you. Let me ask you this. How did you compare him to Malcolm X?
I revered MLK. I questioned Malcolm X.
Uh-huh. And see, I submit that you revered MLK because his message was more acceptable than Malcolm X.
Correct. One was passive.
Yes. And if Malcolm X had not been alive or known at that time, I would suggest that MLK might have been looked at a little differently by you.
Probably.
Because, see, you had a choice and you kind of voted for the non-violent route.
Right.
Because the focus of the violence was you.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of looking at it from Malcolm X's perspective. Because honestly, Malcolm X said nothing different. Malcolm X said nothing different. All he said was, we have a right to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
And if you walk into my house, you do not have the right to challenge me just because you're in charge of the government. You don't have a right to come into my house without the same conditions that you apply to invading a white family's privacy. And I have the same right to carry a gun and use it to defend myself.
I didn't have ill will towards Malcolm X or the Black Panthers, and I really admired Smith and Carlos at the 1968 Olympics for standing up for what they believed in, because I believe that standing up for what you believe in is the message.
Yes, except that the Black Power symbol is more than just standing up for what I believe in. Right? I mean, at least the propaganda. Essentially, the Black Power movement taught Blacks that they were humans, that they were human beings. And as part of being a human being, they had the right to bear arms. They had the right to protect their families. They did not have to turn the other cheek.
They could talk back to the man.
They could talk back to the man. And if they were struck inappropriately, they had the right to defend themselves appropriately. Now, Dr. King would say, that doesn't get you anywhere. They got more guns than we got anyway. If they strike you inappropriately, then just lie down, survive. Eventually, their shame for hitting you will stop them from hitting you. First of all, Martin Luther King was professing a protest tactic. Malcolm X was professing a standard of living.
Interesting.
And we conflated the two. Now, Martin Luther King, because he was the American Gandhi, he had to live that philosophy.
Right.
He had to suffer house bombings and cross burnings in his front yard and being shot at and being jailed as part of his lifestyle.
Right.
In order to make his point with his followers. Malcolm X was saying, stand up for yourself. Go about your life. Do what you need to do. I'm not asking you to get in the streets. I'm just saying, don't take no guff. You don't have to. Be a man. Be the man that you are. Why should I feel guilty because I'm protecting my family from enemies abroad and within?
So MLK was also suggesting, hey, if you get arrested, get arrested.
Yeah.
So you're setting a standard of responses to fill the jails.
Yes.
Of course, the white people took that on themselves too.
Yeah, but now again, that was a protest tactic. MLK wasn't saying go get arrested by yourself.
Right. It was part of the group.
He was saying, let's fill the jails. And eventually they can't arrest everybody. This is how we get the law changed. When they suddenly realize that it's so unjust that nobody is abiding by it, they can't enforce it. And they will see the stupidity of the law. My number one hero was my father. And he was not my hero until I became a man. Because when I became a man, I began to see how heroic he was in navigating the slights that he had to navigate during the time of segregation and raise a family. And as a man, I was able to replay those pictures as a child that I saw him go through. The time, I think I told you the story about the pulling on the side of the road to take a nap during a snowstorm because we had no place to stay. When I tell the story now, I understand the diminishment of a man by a highway patrol officer in front of his family. Then I only understood we were in trouble for some reason. And my father was needlessly ashamed by that. I didn't understand the sense of pride, the sense of hierarchy between son and father. And because of those crosses that he bore for me, he's my number one hero, despite the imagery of a MLK or a Medger Evers. But his heroes were also my heroes. And MLK and Medger Evers were heroes of his. And Medger Evers was a bigger hero because he was local. He was fighting for our right to vote. I went with my father 3 times to get registered to vote. So I know the struggle to vote very intimately, and to understand that Medger Evers was fighting for me and then actually died as a result of that fight, was assassinated because of that fight, makes him an indelible hero. And now that I talk about him, I realize I don't have a picture of him in my office. I need to correct that. Don't get me a picture. I appreciate the picture you got me of Nelson Mandela. And I'm still trying to figure out how I'm gonna surprise you back, but I will, I promise you. But I remember the first time I met Medger Evers back in the 60s. It was about 2 weeks before he died. I knew of him because my dad talked about him so much, but I'd never met him. Didn't even know what he looked like. And back then, I didn't watch the news a lot. I was, 6, 7, 8 years old. I just heard my dad talking about him. But he used to, about once a month, my dad would take us out to dinner. Now, in the segregated South, there weren't a lot of places we could go to dinner in Jackson, Mississippi. And going out to dinner back in the 60s was a rare event for a Black family. I mean, first of all, nobody cooked as well as my mother, so why would we go out? Of course, I didn't think that my mother might need some rest. And so my dad was doing this to help, as a reward to the family and to my mother. But the only place we could go in Jackson was a place called Stephen's Kitchen. And Stephen's Kitchen was the Black Morrison cafeteria, if you will, at the time. It was segregated. It was in the segregated part of downtown on Ferris Street. And we went there one summer or a Sunday after church to eat dinner. And we had been seated. We had just made our order. And all of a sudden we heard this commotion at the front door. And we looked up, and this tall man who was a little taller than my father, and my father was 6'2", and he walked in, and everybody was patting him on the back and shaking his hand, and he couldn't get to his table because everybody was stopping him. As he approached our table to get to his, my dad said, "Phil, look, that's Medger Evers." And he said it with such adoration and I'm like, wow, I thought my dad was great. And look, he's giving homage to this other man. So I'm like, oh, there's Medger Evers, and it was that day that I learned how important he was, because it was that day my dad told me all the work he was doing for us later. Because I said, who is he, And then about 2 weeks later, I came in from playing outside, and I was running through the living room, and my dad was sitting in his chair and he was crying. I looked at him and I was like, what's going on? And then he pointed to the TV. The camera was on him laying down in his driveway. He was covered, and you could hear the commentator or the reporter say that he was shot when he came out. And I remember following the trial very closely. I remember sensing a change in my father for a short period of time. He was so angry and so bitter. The next time I saw that kind of a change was I was accosted one night by a man, and they caught the man, and I saw that vicious anger come up again. Anyway, that was the night that Medger became my indelible, unassailable hero.
You know, it's interesting. The conversation was started by focusing on heroes. And to me, a hero is somebody that you can't touch.
Right.
They're somebody you look up to in a fashion, but you're not going to sit down and have dinner with them most of the time. Maybe Medger Evers, but mentors and models, well, mentors, I believe, are part of a conversation. And models may or may not be, but you can have a role model that you never really meet. So when you were talking about your dad as a hero, I think your dad fits into the mentor model hero, but he's approachable from that standpoint.
See, I disagree. I disagree with your definition of can't touch.
Okay.
Okay. I think you can have dinner with your hero. I think you can be approached. Let me go back to your definition of can't touch.
Yeah.
All right. My dad is a hero because I have now made him a mythical figure. He wasn't perfect, but he was always striving to be balanced and fair and righteous. He was a very religious man. And so I aspire to be him. And from that perspective, I don't think I ever achieve it. And from that perspective, I can't touch him. The more I live, between his death and now, he becomes more and more mystical and more perfect, because just a week before he died, we had an argument because it's father and son. When I really stop and think about him as a human being, yeah, he was flawed. But when I think about what he was aspiring to be and the discussions and conversations that we had that helped mold me as a man, and the experiences we went through together, that's what makes him my hero figure.
By the way, I think you and I had the same father.
So you're a brother from another mother? Okay, I accept that.
I didn't really see my dad for what he was until later on in his years. And we worked together for about 15 years before he died, because we both sat on a foundation together that, which now I'm the co-president of, but we worked together on that. And I watched him lead the foundation. I watched the admiration that the non-for-profits that we gifted had for him, and the people that he met and the impact that he had in helping those who were less fortunate, or organizations that had, like the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and others that he was invested in. So once I started to work with him, and as he got older and I got more invested in the foundation, I had a much greater understanding of how he quietly went about being a mentor and a resource for many others, many of whom I got to meet as he, after he died, just through emails and letters of compliments of the work that he did to help others. Even though he was running the foundation, he was always a resource for the non-for-profits that we gifted to help them out with advice. And I do a lot of what he does for people, students, etc. So he died in 3 years ago. I think the same thing that you went through in terms of growing to understand your dad and admire him I would suggest the same thing. There were very few arguments that my dad and I had. And if we did, they were mostly about his new wife, because it wasn't my mother. But I used to call him on my way up to LA when I was sitting in traffic and just BS. And now my daughter, Brianna, does that. She just calls me out of the blue when she's going out for a walk or something. So the admiration that I had for my dad, I don't think I ever acknowledged it to him in the fashion that I should have. And much of what he did became very much of a model for me from that standpoint. So I think this concept of heroes and mentors and models, in many cases, individuals have all three titles. And in all cases, they are those people who have influenced you in some fashion to be a better person, if you choose the right ones.
Absolutely. I remember the most significant, the most memorable argument that I had with my father was, I think I had just graduated from vet school, and I was probably beginning to feel my vim and vigor. And we got into a discussion about politics. And it was one of the first times that I felt confident enough to have an opinion that might challenge my father's. And I probably got a little excited in the discussion, but I enjoyed the debate. And I debated my father as if I was debating an opponent. And I think it was the first time he'd seen me in that type of a mode. The next day we went hunting, quail hunting, and we were walking through the forest. He was behind me, and he said, "Son, I really enjoyed that discussion we had last night." And I said, "Oh yeah, me too, Dad." And then he said, "Yeah, well, you kind of got a little excited during that discussion." I said, "Well, we were talking about something I really believed in. I was just expressing myself." He said, "Well, I thought so, but there were times when you kind of got a little out of hand. And I just want to remind you about something." And then all of a sudden I heard the shotgun go, and then he said, "I will always be your dad. And so if you ever get to the point where you think that you're going to win, you better let me win, or don't go to sleep that night." And I kind of froze, and I said, "Yes, sir. Okay, I get it." And then he laughed, ejected the cartridge, and we went on hunting, and it was truly a joke. It wasn't a threat or anything, but when he took it that far, I was just like, oh my God, I must have done something to disrespect him last night. And he let it go. And then he used that moment to just let me know, check yourself sometimes when you're talking to your elders.
I think you just gave us a great segue for another conversation.
I think so too.
But let's just bring the heroes home by saying that there are people out there that we can all look up to and admire that will help us become better people. And whether they're black, white, or doesn't really matter. It's just there are people out there that we can all benefit from, because there are some great ideas and some thoughts that we're never going to find on our own. But with the right people around us, we can be better people.
Well, one of the things we did not talk about were what heroes do you have? That's another conversation too.
Heroes, is that a female hero?
A female models, female heroes.
I thought those were heroines, but that's a drug.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for another courageous conversation. Be sure to follow us and check back next week for more.